John, today's question comes from Jim. Again, Jim is someone who has been listening or watching the estate planning series. Lots of questions coming in about that.
Yeah, it's been a good topic.
Good stuff. Yep. He said, thank you for the estate planning series. It was very beneficial as we are in the process of updating all of our estate documents. We have been able to ask our lawyer about all the details that you mentioned in the series and ensure our plan is the best possible. We did have a question about trusts being named as beneficiaries of our IRA accounts. We are under the impression that if an IRA goes through a trust as a conduit trust, the proceeds will be taxed at the beneficiary's tax rate. But if an IRA goes into the trust as an accumulation trust, the proceeds will be taxed at the highest rate. I would assume that the trust you discussed when dealing with the 4 Ds, and that was what? Disability, death, divorce,
and debts.
Yep. Should this be a consideration? We very much enjoy learning from all your podcasts. Would appreciate your feedback. Keep up the good work, Jim. All right. So, John, I think you've got the gist of what he is asking here.
Do. And so here's the brief recap, and here's where he's definitely gotten some information. Mm-hmm. And he's gotten almost all of it.
He's almost there. It's almost closed the loop.
Almost. So let's close the loop. So brief recap. We're talking about leaving assets to beneficiaries like your children in trust for asset protection.
Right.
So that those assets would be shielded from creditors and divorcing spouses and such, right? Now, when it comes to an IRA, post-Secure Act, that non-spouse beneficiary is going to have to take assets over the course of 10 years, right? Take all the withdrawals. And those are taxable distributions. Now, there's 2 ways you can set up a trust for a beneficiary when it comes to an IRA. The first one he mentions is what's called a conduit trust. And so the conduit trust says that the required distribution will leave the IRA and then immediately leave the trust and go to the beneficiary. All right? And he's correct here because any distributions that go to the beneficiary are taxed to the beneficiary. And so he's pointing out then that if it's a conduit trust, that it would be taxed at the beneficiary's rates, which are probably lower, right? Possibly. So that's true. All of that is true. However, that totally blows your asset protection, right? Because if the assets are leaving the trust, once they're out of the trust, they're done.
Right.
And so he's recognizing then that what I was probably talking about was what we call an accumulation trust, where the assets leave the IRA, but they don't have to leave the trust. They can accumulate within the trust.
Okay.
All right. Now, that makes the income, again, it's taxable when it leaves the IRA. So the question becomes, who's going to pay the tax? And this is where I say he had it almost correct. Because what he says here is, but if the IRA goes to the trust as an accumulation trust, the proceeds would be taxed at the highest rate. So trusts, if they are taxed as a trust, are subject to, you get to the higher tax rates faster. I think something like $12,000 and you're in the highest tax bracket of income. And if you're talking about the RMDs over 10 years from an IRA, then you're probably going to be well over that $12,000. So he's right if it's taxed as a trust. But here's a suggestion. Internal Revenue Code Section 678.
Oh, Lord.
What we would often refer to as a beneficiary defective grantor trust. So a grantor trust is where, even though the assets are in the trust, the grantor, the person that created the trust, is taxed as if they own them, right? So that trust earns interest. I put that interest on my personal tax return. Section 678 says that somebody other than the grantor is treated as the owner.
Okay.
So typically that would be the beneficiary, right? So this is where you get the beneficiary defective grantor trust.
Right.
It's taxed like a grantor trust, except that you're replacing the grantor with the beneficiary.
Yeah.
Right? So what this does is this would allow the IRA money to leave the IRA, stay in the trust for asset protection, but still be taxed to the beneficiary like a grantor trust.
Gotcha.
All right. And essentially in order to do that, it's just a little trick in the drafting. Internal Revenue Code 678 says that if the beneficiary has the ability to vest in themselves either the income or the principal, then they're treated as the owner for income tax purposes.
Gotcha.
Right? And there's some other rules on that. But for example, now if you gave them an unlimited right, if you gave the beneficiary the unlimited right to distribute the income and principal to themselves, well, once again, you've blown the asset protection. Mm-hmm. But if you were to limit that in some way, shape, or form, and let's say that Devin, I create this trust for you, right? My IRA goes into it, and it says that you have the right as the beneficiary to demand income or principal, but limited for your healthcare needs. And then I define healthcare needs as excluding whatever I want it to exclude. Right? So I've got a very narrowly tailored situation,
right,
where you have the power to vest income and principal in yourself. And so because it's so narrowly tailored, it's not going to subject you, we're not necessarily blowing the asset protection.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have done is triggered the grantor trust status under 678. So now we get the benefit of the accumulation trust.
Right.
We get the asset protection of the accumulation trust, but we get the tax of the conduit trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, John, this goes back to what we talked about was the entire intention of our series that we did on the 3 parts to a perfect estate plan. And that was to arm people with information to be able to have these conversations, mm-hmm. right? And so this was someone who took notes from the series. They sat down with their attorney, and then their attorney told them something that seemed a little different than what we said.
Well, and it was right? What their attorney told them was right. What he didn't give them was a solution to the problem.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
And so to Greg, what I would say is maybe call the law firm back and say, hey, I've got a question. Could you structure those descendants' trusts as accumulation trusts, but also structure them so that they are taxed under Section 678 to the beneficiary and get the best of both worlds? And the attorney's going to say, most likely, I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Yeah. Now, let's be nice, because what we want to do here is just leave Jim with a resource that he can just send this video or this episode to his attorney without making him feel like an idiot.
That's it. Sure.
Okay.
Sure. But, a lot of estate planners are not tax professionals.
Right.
They know enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so they know the difference between an accumulation trust and a conduit trust, and they know the pros and cons of the two. To take it that little tiny step further and to pull Section 678 out of the sky and know how to interpret that and incorporate that. And then from here, then you can get into some situations where, do you want to create essentially where you can turn that on and off?
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say one of Jim's kids is already in the highest tax bracket and lives in California. Mm-hmm. But let's say Jim here lives in Texas. So these trusts for the kids would presumably be Texas trusts.
Yeah.
Right? So if they're taxed under Texas law, it may make more sense to have them taxed as a trust. Their kids already in the highest tax bracket. So the fact that you're paying 37% in federal income tax is irrelevant. So you're going to pay 37% either way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Except now, because it's a Texas trust and it's an accumulation trust that is taxed as a trust, you've avoided the California state income tax.
Yeah.
Which is a 13% savings for that person, right? So you might want to be able to turn that on and turn that off, and because who knows what the beneficiary situation is going to be. So building an accumulation trust that could be a 678 beneficiary defective grantor trust And then going one step further from that and building in a toggle where that could go on and off from tax year to tax year. Now you're getting into some really fancy stuff.
Oh, yeah, that is fancy. That is for sure. Jim, I hope that answered your question. I think it probably did. And now you have some information that you can take back to your attorney and say, hey, what about this? Which is the entire point.
That's right.
of why we do
And
this
if
show.
your attorney is not a tax person, I feel bad for them.
Yeah, right. They're going to say, what? Let me ask ChatGPT.
You want me to make this a 678 defective grantor trust with a toggle?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yes. Very good. All right, Jim. Take that back to him and get done what you need to get done. Very good. And listeners and viewers, if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Send those to us. BigPictureRetirement.com, top right-hand bar. Ask a question. Look forward to seeing yours there. Hope you get that added soon. We've got a lot of questions built up, but we are going to try to get to all of these. We just had an episode published where we had, John, we answered 5 or 6 questions.
We answered an hour and a half of them,
episode.
I think.
Yeah. It seemed like it went forever. And so we might have to do some catch-up episodes to get these. So it may not take that long for your question to get answered if we start burning through these pretty quickly. But anyway, bigpictureretirement.com, top right-hand bar. You can find it there. Thanks for watching.